good evening. Tonight, we take a gentle step away from the familiar comforts of the present and descend slowly into the quieter shadows of the ancient past. There, behind the marble facades and gleaming armor, lies a world that was far less glorious than we like to remember. A world of blood, of sand, and of silence. But don't worry, you will not be made to fight. Not truly. You're merely here to observe, to listen. Once struggled beneath its weight, we begin our slow journey in a place of legenda Roman gladiator school, where hope was a luxury and survival depended not on strength, but on endurance. You may think you've heard this story before, of warriors cheered by crowds, of swords flashing beneath the midday sun. But the truth, as always, lies in the quieter corners. Let's walk there now, together. Imagine waking before the first light breaks the horizon. The room you lie in is dim and close. Stone walls sweat with the night's chill. Your bedding is nothing more than straw, loosely stuffed into a worn linen sack that smells faintly of old mold and tired men. Your limbs are sore, heavy with yesterday's training. Your stomach growls not from hunger alone, but from the thin gruel that offered little comfort the night before. You sit up slowly, aware of every ache, and reach for the cup of water beside your cot. The water is lukewarm and tastes faintly of clay. You sip it anyway. It may be the cleanest thing you encounter all day. You are not a volunteer. You are not a hero. You are a commodity, a man, purchased, branded, and trained to perform for entertainment. You may have once been a soldier, or a slave, or simply poor. That part matters little now. What matters is how well you move, how long you last, how much the crowd will enjoy watching you bleed. Your days begin with drills, not with real swords at first. Instead, you are handed a wooden blade twice as heavy as the real thing, designed to make your muscles ache. The doctors, old veterans, who've survived long enough to teach bark orders in harsh Latin. You do not question them. You swing, you block, you fall, you get back up. This is not for glory. This is routine, repetition, a pattern of movement stamped into your body until it obeys without thought. Food is handed out in quiet lines. Thick barley, porridge, beans, sometimes bread if you are fortunate. The diet is meant to bulk the body, not nourish the spirit. You eat quickly. Talking is discouraged. The others beside you are competitors. You may be paired with one of them in the arena someday. It's best not to become too familiar. That way, if they fall, or if you're the one to strike the final blow, the guilt doesn't linger quite so long. The sun climbs, sweat stings your eyes. You train under its heat for hours. Your skin toughens, blisters harden into callousness. Yet the pain never truly fades. Bruises bloom daily. Knees grind against packed sand. A misstep earns you a sharp correctional strike from a stick. A scolding that stays with you longer than the pain itself. Injuries fester easily. Clean water is scarce. Bandages, when they exist, are reused. Infection is a quiet, creeping danger. A small cut on the ankle can swell in a matter of days. Fevers come suddenly. Those who shiver in the corners of the dormitory are quietly removed. Sometimes they recover, sometimes not. No one asks, no one is told. At night, you try to rest. The torches flicker in iron sconces, casting trembling shadows against the stone. The sounds of coughing, of soft prayers, whispered in a dozen dialects, fill the air. Someone snores, someone mutters. You pull your thin blanket tighter and turn your face to the wall. Tomorrow will be the same, unless it's worse. And then the day comes, the day you are led from your cell, the day you walk beneath the stands of the amphitheater, the day you hear the roar of 1,000 strangers waiting to see whether you live or die. You carry a real weapon now. It glints in the sunlight, but the weight in your hand feels unfamiliar. Your palms are already damp. The gate creaks open. You step into the arena. The crowd is deafening. You don't look at them. You look at your opponent. He is sweating too. He grips his weapon tightly. He might be younger than you. He might be older. You'll never know his name. There is no ceremony, no introduction. The signal is given. You stumble. Your vision narrows to shapes and movement and breath. Sand kicks up around your feet. Pain blossoms, then fades into numbness. You survive. You're not victorious. You're simply not dead. You're led back through the same gate. Your body aches. Your thoughts are slow. Your skin stings from a dozen strikes. The crowd forgets your face the moment the next match begins. You are not a hero. You are not a legend. You are a body, a spectacle, a bet. And tomorrow you will train again. This was life as a gladiator, not a glorious tale carved into marble, but a pattern of sweat, fear, obedience, and exhaustion. You were not expected to thrive, only to last long enough to make the crowd cheer, long enough to make a profit. Now, take a slow breath in and out. The noise of the arena fades. The torches dim, and in the stillness of this ancient world, we shift our gaze. Not all who were trapped by Rome chose to endure quietly. Some rebelled not in noise, but in patience, in cleverness, in desperation turned into strategy. As we leave behind the training yard and the echo of swords on sand, let your mind follow the shadowed path of a man who escaped his chains and raised a storm from the dust. His name was Spartacus. Let us follow him now. His name was Spartacus, and like many others, he was not born into slavery. He had once been a free man of Thracian, from a land of rough hills and thick forests, far from the marble temples of Rome. He had fought as a soldier, a skilled one, in service to the very empire that would one day shackle him. But something changed. Perhaps a betrayal, perhaps a refusal, perhaps simply bad luck. The record is silent. What remains is the fact. He was taken, enslaved, sold to a Lanista, and sent to a gladiator school in Capua. Imagine Spartacus now, yet a leader, not yet a legend, just another man in the long rows of the ludus, performing drills in silence. Watching, always watching. The Capua school was large, infamous for its brutality, and tightly controlled. The men there were trained to be efficient, obedient, and expendable. But Spartacus did not forget. He did not break. He did not shout or boast. Instead, he waited. He studied the patterns of the guards. He listened to whispered complaints and buried resentments. The daily rhythm of the school, so harsh and so familiar, became his map. And then one day it began, not with a battle cry, but with a kitchen knife. According to the ancient sources, it started with about 70 men. They had no weapons, only tools stolen from the kitchens and the stables. But they had timing. They moved quickly, overwhelming their guards, breaking free from their cells, and spilling out into the countryside. The revolt was not elegant, not at first. The men scavenged as they fled, arming themselves with anything they could find. They raided wagons, farms, caravans. What they lacked in organization, they made up for in determination. The Roman authorities, at first, dismissed the uprising. Just another disturbance. Just more slaves. But Spartacus was not just a runaway. He had fought for Rome. He knew its tactics. He understood how they moved, how they underestimated. He and his followers found refuge on Mount Vesuvius, not yet the legendary volcano it would later become. But even then, a looming presence over the southern lands. There high above the plains, they waited. Rome sent troops, confident troops, and the slaves, ragged and outnumbered, seemed trapped. But Spartacus once again watched. He ordered vines to be twisted into ropes. Quietly, under cover of night, he and his men lowered themselves down the steepest side of the mountain, the one the Romans believed impassable land, surprised the camp from behind. It was quick, it was brutal, and it worked. Now Rome paid attention. The rebellion grew. Word spread across the countryside. Slaves from farms, from mines, from households, they ran. They joined. Spartacus did not turn them away. In time, his followers numbered in the thousands. Some say as many as 70,000. They had no homeland, no great fortress. Only the movement itself, the constant march away from Rome. Still, Spartacus did not lash out blindly. He chose his battles. He avoided direct confrontation with the legions whenever possible. His goal, it seems, was not to destroy Rome, but to escape it. Many believe he wished to lead his people north, across the Alps, to freedom. But not all of his followers agreed. Some wanted revenge, others wanted loot. The rebellion, once small and tightly bound, began to splinter. Spartacus still led, still fought. He won battle after battle. Roman generals were humiliated. At one point, he even had access to the sea, arranging with pirates to transport his men. But the deal collapsed. The ships never came. Time turned against them. Rome sent Crassus, man of immense wealth and sharp ambition. He did not underestimate Spartacus. He built walls, ditches, traps. He pushed the rebels south, cutting off escape, forcing confrontation. By then, the rebellion was tired, hungry, disorganized. The vision of freedom had blurred into survival. The final battle came somewhere near the river Silurus. The rebels fought fiercely, desperately. They had nowhere else to go. Spartacus, according to legend, fought his way toward Crassus himself. But he fell, surrounded by the press of swords and shields. His body was never found. And in some ways, that seems right. A man like Spartacus lives more vividly in myth than in marble. The aftermath was grim. 6,000 captured rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, the long road stretching from Rome to Capua, a silent warning in the shape of wooden crosses and swinging corpses. A terrible punctuation to a rebellion born of desperation. But Spartacus remained, in stories, in whispers, in the quiet fear of senators. A man who refused the rhythm, who for a brief moment made the empire tremble. And now, as we leave the dusty roads behind and the clamor of battle fades into memory, let your breath ease. The night deepens. The fires have burned low. The scent of smoke and sweat gives way to cool stone and flickering torchlight. Our next steps take us not above ground, but beneath it, into the belly of the Colosseum, into its forgotten corners, where mechanisms groaned in the dark and animals waited in iron cages. Let's walk slowly now into the spaces where no crowd ever looked. The crowd above is still cheering. Their voices, layered with dust and heat, echo through the stone arches. But you are not among them. You are far below, beneath the wooden floor of the arena, where sunlight barely reaches and the air is thick with dampness and rust. The Colosseum is alive, but not just with people. It breathes through its foundations, through rope and pulley, cage and corridor. Down here, torches burn low. The ceilings are low, too, carved to the limits of the underground space. The floor creaks overhead with the weight of gladiators, chariots, and beasts. You move carefully, stepping over coiled rope, ducking beneath beams. The walls sweat with the moisture of morning condensation and the breath of waiting animals. This is the hypogeum, the hidden level of the Colosseum. It was added later in the arena's life. At first, the floor above had been a simple surface of sand over wood, open to the skies. But the Romans, ever eager for grandeur, expanded their ambition. They built down into the earth, creating a maze of tunnels, elevators, cages, and trapdoors. Here, in these tight quarters, the shows were assembled in secret, like clockwork, like ritual. The mechanisms were sophisticated. Wooden platforms slid forward on greased tracks. Elevators, operated by pulleys and manpower, hoisted entire cages up into the arena above. Imagine the tension in that moment. The creaking of rope, the shuffle of paws, the hiss of steam rising from the sweating backs of men. A lion, perhaps, pacing in the dark, now slowly lifted into sunlight. When the trapdoor snapped open, it appeared as if by magic, but there was no magic here, only calculation. Each show required days of preparation, sometimes weeks. The Roman spectacles were not haphazard affairs. They were produced with precision by engineers, planners, laborers. Each animal, each fighter, each prop had a place, a cue, a moment. And behind it all, below the noise, someone had to make it move. The animals came in cages, dragged into place through narrow halls. Tigers from Asia, crocodiles from the Nile, bears from the forests of Germania. The sounds of them must have been strange and terrifying growls and shrieks echoing off the stone. Some refused to move. Some thrashed against their bars. Some fell silent, as if they knew. Slaves worked down here, always, and often criminals. Their job was to load the lifts, reset the gears, oil the wood, feed the creatures. Accidents happened. A misstep, a failed latch, a door left Audran's silence would be broken by a scream, a flurry of motion, and then silence again. But the games did not pause, not for one worker lost in the dark. And still, the arena thrived above. You can still hear the creak of the winches now, if you listen. The faint rasp of a wooden platform being pulled into place. The chittering of wheels beneath a stage prop. The cough of a handler whispering to a panther, trying not to show fear. There were other features, too. Canals for flooding the arena, floriès. Even naval battles were staged here, though only in the early years, before the hypogeum was built. For a time, the Colosseum could become a lake. Boats floated across it. Men fell into it. It must have seemed wondrous. But even then, it was only illusion. The water was shallow, the vessels small. Still, for the viewer, it was enough. The illusion was the truth. Above ground, the crowd did not see any of this. They saw a gate open, a beast emerge, a warrior step forward. But beneath them, dozens of men coordinated every moment, every reveal. The machinery of violence required silence, precision, and complete invisibility. The floor of the arena was built with trapdoors, dozens of them each, marked on hidden diagrams. Actors and animals could emerge at precise locations, as if summoned. To the audience, it was divine. To those below, it was grueling. Sometimes, the performers above waited in silence, swords in hand, while below, a lift jammed. Men would scramble in the half-dark, trying to fix the gear, to loosen the rope, to keep the illusion alive. Delay meant confusion. Confusion meant danger. And when the games ended, the quiet returned. The animals were removed, or buried. The wounded were dragged away. Blood was raked over with fresh sand. The audience left satisfied, their appetite for spectacle briefly sated. But down here, beneath their feet, the workers remained, cleaning, repairing, preparing again. Even now, centuries later, archaeologists walk those same corridors with lanterns and flashlights. They step carefully. The bones are gone, but the walls remember. The grooves in the stone tell of cages dragged countless times. The ceiling, blackened with soot, still bears witness to the torches that once flickered with tension and urgency. And if you listen, truly listen, you might imagine the breath of the tiger, the creak of the lift, the whisper of a handler praying under his breath, hoping to make it through another day. The Colosseum above was glory, but down here it was labor, precision, fear, and silence. Now we rise again, climb the worn stairs, let the torchlight fade behind us. The air grows warmer, sweeter. The sound of laughter returns, not the crowd's roar, but something more delicate. We leave the hypogeum behind and find ourselves not in chains, but in silk. Our final stop tonight is not one of blood, but of perfume, of banquets and golden goblets and dangerous charm. We are headed now to the Palatine Hill, to the candlelit splendor of the emperor's table. Let us walk there, slowly. The steps up to the Palatine Hill are smooth from centuries of sandals. They wind upward between manicured gardens and marble columns, flanked by statues of forgotten gods and wide pools that reflect the sky in gentle ripples. Here, in this curated world of elegance, the sounds are hushed. Laughter floats gently on the breeze. Music hums from somewhere out of view flutes, perhaps, and the gentle pluck of strings. It is evening. The heat of the Roman day has finally begun to fade. The sky glows faintly with the last embers of the sun, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Braziers flicker along the mosaic walkways, releasing the scent of cinnamon and myrrh into the air. Slaves, dressed in deep-colored linen, move silently between guests, their footsteps muffled by thick rugs and polished stone. Everything is soft here, controlled, or at least it seems to be. You are a guest tonight, not in reality, of course, but imagine yourself stepping into the great dining room of a Roman emperor. The doors are bronze, intricately carved, opening inward to reveal a chamber glowing with oil lamps and low conversation. The walls are frescoed with mythological scenes, Venus rising from the sea, Jupiter hurling his lightning, Mars in red robes, always watching. The ceiling above is coffered, painted blue and gold to mimic the night sky. At the far end of the room reclines the Emperor himself, draped in silk, surrounded by trusted men and some not so trusted. His smile is polite, practiced, but his eyes do not blink as much as they should. Around him, senators and nobles pretend not to watch each other too closely. You are not seated in chairs tonight. No, this is a convivium, a Roman banquet of the elite, and you recline on couches. Your feet point outward, your elbow rests on plush cushions, and in your free hand is a goblet heavy with etched gold, filled with wine already mixed with honey and herbs. You sip slowly. You don't choose the wine, the cupbearer does. And he does not choose for flavor. He chooses based on the latest politics. The first course is brought forward, oysters still cool from the sea, arranged on silver trays, then dormaistini, roasted, stuffed with nuts and herbs, nestled in delicate wreaths of bay leaves. Flamingo tongue is next, considered a delicacy, its taste exaggerated more by reputation than by flavor. You chew slowly, carefully, eyes down. Around you, the others are doing the same. Conversation is hushed, but a senator compliments the emperor's taste in lamps. Another remarks on the quality of the linen napkins. Every sentence is a game, every nod a move on the invisible board of favor and fear. Jokes are made, but not too clever. No one wants to outshine the man reclining at the center of it all. Servants move constantly. They refill wine, offer damp towels scented with rosewater, adjust the curtains when the breeze shifts. A slave child plays the cithara, fingers trembling slightly as the melody fills the gaps between conversations. A poet begins to recite something pastoral, something harmless. He chooses his words with the caution of a man balancing on a blade. The food becomes more elaborate. Peacocks stuffed with herbs, boar glazed in wine, fish served in sauces so complex that their ingredients are whispered like spells. Between courses, entertainers arrive, jugglers, acrobats, a blind singer from the provinces whose voice, though soft, silences the room briefly. But then come the questions. The emperor enjoys hearing opinions, not for their insight, but for the pleasure of watching men squirm beneath their own words. What do you think he might say of the general in Gaul? The senator shifts, smiles, chooses each word, as if it might be carved into stone. This is not merely dinner. This is performance, theater, a delicate and dangerous dance performed on silk cushions and golden plates. One wrong phrase, one misjudged toast, and the consequence may not arrive tonight, but it will arrive. You feel the tension, quiet and constant, just beneath the music and the perfume. You feel it in the way a guest reaches for his cup with two handshaking first that it's his. In the way laughter never quite touches the eyes. In the way every plate is tasted first by someone else. And yet, the illusion of ease is beautiful. The garden beyond the colonnade is lit with lanterns. A breeze stirs the palm fronds. The marble glows in the moonlight. It is peaceful and dangerous all at once. The banquet wins on the later courses are more indulgent, more extravagant, but fewer guests still eat. By now, most have reached that precise point of polite fullness, signaling contentment without gluttony. Still, platters continue to arrive, figs stuffed with almonds, dates soaked in wine, honey-glazed pastries arranged in pyramids. Some guests slip away quietly, others remain until the emperor yawns an unspoken dismissal. No one dares leave before him, and when he does rise, slow and graceful, the room freezes for the briefest moment. A wave of quiet deference follows him as he departs. Only once he is gone do voices rise again gently, carefully, as if testing the safety of the air, and you are left among the flickering lamps and cooling dishes, feeling the weight of privilege as more burden than reward. You recline among silks and spices, but your thoughts drift slowly to the simpler lives beyond the walls, to those who clean the platters, sweep the floors, draw the baths, to those who never taste the flamingo, but sleep more easily. The night grows deeper now, the candles are shorter, the conversation thinner, the music fades, and outside, the stars have crept fully into the sky. You rise slowly, stepping out onto the terrace. The Palatine Hill stretches quietly beneath your feet. Rome glows faintly in the distance, its domes, its fires, its endless murmur of ambition, and you return now to the present, to your own breath, your own bed, your own quiet. The journey is over, from the brutal drill yards of the ludus to the mountains of rebellion, to the echoing tunnels beneath the Colosseum, and now, to the dangerous calm of a golden banquet table. We have wandered through the layers of Rome, not carved in stone, but etched into the lives of those who lived it. Let your breath soften. Let the rhythm of sleep pull gently at the edges of your thoughts. The empire is quiet now. This is the story behind the stones of glory, the untold tale of the millions who labored, suffered, and sometimes vanished entirely beneath the rising walls of empire. Their names were never carved into monuments, but their lives formed the very foundation of one of the most enduring symbols of human endeavor, the Great Wall of China. So, get comfortable, ease into the rhythm of the past, and let your mind gently settle into the lives of those long gone, but not entirely forgotten, waking in the faint, colorless light of early dawn. The cold has seeped through your thin bedding during the night, and now clings to your skin like morning fog. Around you, dozens of others search one, a silent echo of your own fatigue. You are one of thousands, and no one will remember your name. You rise slowly, your joints stiff from another night on hardened earth. Your hands, rough and blistered, move with practiced habit, pulling on a tunic crusted with dust, binding your feet in strips of worn cloth, and preparing yourself for the day's labor. There is no ceremony, no encouragement, just the sharp bark of a foreman's voice echoing down the valley. The work begins before the sun fully crests the mountains, and it will not end until the last glow of daylight has faded into the west. The wall itself stretches out before you like a sleeping serpent, part stone, part packed earth, part illusion. At this stage, it is not yet a wall as we might imagine it. In many regions, it is a dirt rampart, reinforced with layers of reed and stone, endlessly built and rebuilt over time. You work with your hands, and with tools worn dull from use. The stone is heavy, the baskets of soil heavier still. You and your fellow workers, some conscripts, some convicts, some unlucky peasants, caught up in quotas form a chain, each passing weight to the next. And though the rhythm becomes your heartbeat, it never quite dulls the strain in your shoulders or the ache in your knees. Food is basic and often insufficient. A bowl of thin millet gruel in the morning, perhaps a scoop of rice at midday, and little more at night. Water must be rationed, carried in from distant wells or drawn from streams already half dried by the heat of northern China's unforgiving climate. There is no privacy here, no shelter from the sun or wind, no relief from the ever-present dust that clings to your skin, your lungs, your very thoughts. You learn to live within your body's limits, and sometimes beyond them, and always, there is the quiet fear of collapse, of punishment, of sickness that spreads quickly and is treated with apathy, or of simply vanishing into the wall itself. The stories drift among the workers like dry leaves in the wind. Men who fell into the trenches and were buried where they lay, bodies hidden within the foundation, their silence now part of the stone. Whether these tales are true or only whispered warnings matters little. The fear is enough. Supervision is strict, but not necessarily orderly. Overseers, appointed by distant officials, care less about humanity and more about quotas. A worker who lags may be beaten. A worker who flees may be hunted down. There is little recourse for mercy. Your life here is part of a number, tallied and tracked only until your usefulness ends. Yet, amid the hardship, small moments linger. A shared joke between tired companions, the flicker of lantern light on a clear night sky, the unexpected sweetness of a dried date shared among friends. These are the human touches, the breath of life that persists even in suffering. You live each day as it comes, one foot in front of the other, one basket of soil, then the next. The rhythm of your life is the rhythm of the wall, and slowly, that wall rises not in a glorious act of triumph, but through the persistence of countless unnamed hands, layer upon layer, stone upon stone, until, eventually, your part is done. You are dismissed, or you die, or you vanish, remembered only in the grit between the stones. And still the wall continues to grow. Let us move forward now, from the dust of daily labor, into the cold, calculating world of the man who ordered its rise. And still the wall continues to grow. Let us drift now, from the dust and sweat of the worksite, to the cold, ambitious world of the man who ordered its rise, a ruler both feared and revered, whose name echoes through time like the clang of bronze. Qin Shi Huang. He was not born into peace, but into a fractured land. Imagine a map of ancient China, not as a single nation, but as a mosaic of warring states, each with its own rulers, its own laws, and its own ambitions. This period, known as the Warring States, was marked by constant conflict. Rival kings locked in brutal cycles of conquest and betrayal. It was into this fractured world that the boy Zheng was born in 259 BCE, a prince of the western state of Qin. From his earliest years, his life was shaped by suspicion and maneuvering. Even his parentage was shadowed by rumors of scandal, of manipulation, of power games played behind silk curtains. But young Zhang grew into something formidable, sharp-minded, unforgiving, quietly calculating. By the age of 13, he was king in name, though regents ruled in his stead. By 22, he had seized full control, and by 38, he had done what no man before him had achieved. He had conquered all, one by one, the rival states, fell, Han, Shao, Yanwei, Ch. Chu, Qi. Some collapsed under siege, others surrendered, only to be absorbed and dismantled. Zhang's armies were brutal, efficient, relentless. And in 221 BCE, he declared himself not merely king, but something far more ambitious. He would be emperor. The first emperor. The Shi, Huangdi. No longer just a man, now a symbol, an idea. And with this new title came new visions. He would not rule a loose collection of lands. He would forge a unified empire, centralized, standardized. To that end, he imposed sweeping reforms, many of which would outlast even his dynasty. Weights and measures were made uniform. The written script was standardized. Roads were built across provinces, wide enough to accommodate 6 horse-drawn chariots side by side. Currencies were replaced with imperial coins, round with square holes. Even the axles of carts were regulated, so that ruts worn into the roadways would align across the empire. But centralization came at a cost. Dissent was crushed. Regional identities were suppressed. Scholars who resisted his ideology were silenced, some through exile, others through more permanent means. An infamous episode tells of books burned by imperial decree, histories, philosophies, teachings of Confucius, all reduced to ash, deemed dangerous to the unity of the state. The emperor surrounded himself with ministers loyal only to him. Among them, the notorious legalist Li Xia, brilliant, ruthless administrator who championed a state governed by strict laws and harsh punishment. Under their combined rule, laws were enforced with mathematical coldness, rewards for obedience, swift retribution for disobedience. The Great Wall, as we've just seen, was part of this vision, not built from scratch, but stitched together from existing regional walls, reinforced, extended, guarded, and above, all made to reflect the emperor's might. It was not merely a defense against northern nomads. It was a symbol, a boundary, a message. The empire ends here, and chaos lies beyond. Yet for all his power, the first emperor was never at peace. He feared death with an intensity that consumed him. As he aged, his obsession with immortality deepened. He sent envoys across land and sea, seeking elixirs and sages who could grant eternal life. Strange concoctions were brewed, pills of mercury and gold, potions promising to still the decay of time. He took them, faithfully, desperately, and slowly. They poisoned him, but before death came, he ordered one final project, perhaps his most famous, a tomb, a vast underground palace constructed in secret, beneath a hill in modern-day Xi'an. Within it, thousands of life-size soldiers were crafted from clay, each with unique features, each facing east, eternally prepared to defend their emperor in the afterlife. The Terracotta Army. He died in 210 BCE, far from the capital, while traveling in search of yet another elixir. His death was concealed for weeks, his body transported in a cart filled with salted fish to mask the odor of decay. Ministers forged edicts in his name, desperate to control the succession before word reached the people. His empire did not survive long. Within a few years, rebellion swept the land. The Qin dynasty fell, but the name Qin, pronounced Qin, would echo through time. It would become the root word for the nation itself, China. And so, his legacy remains: the Great Wall, the unified script, the roads, the coins, the idea of empire, and beneath it all, a man who believed he could outlast death and remake the world in the image of his will. Now, let us follow the wall itself. From the ambitions of its creator, we drift forward across centuries, two lonely outposts buried beneath sand, two forgotten towers where soldiers once watched in silence, and where, even now, secrets lie beneath the dunes. And where, even now, secrets lie beneath the dunes, the Great Wall, though born in the reign of the first emperor, did not end with him. It evolved, it stretched, it fractured and was rebuilt, abandoned and reclaimed. Dynasties rose and fell, and with each the wall was reshaped, sometimes left to crumble, sometimes reinforced with new stone, new watchtowers, new ambitions. Imagine yourself now, not at the bustling construction sites of Chin, but somewhere quiet, remote, where the wind whispers low across the ground and the earth is parched, almost white. You are standing in the Gobi Desert. Before you, what appears to be no more than a mound of dirt, but look closer, and you'll see the outline of a square base, a foundation, a forgotten outpost. These are the long-buried watchtowers of the wall, not the grand stone structures of postcard images, but crumbling relics, built of tamped earth and wood, baked for centuries under the sun. Many of these towers are barely visible, now half swallowed by sand, worn away by time and wind, and for centuries they were overlooked, unremarked, until recently. Archaeologists, equipped with satellite imagery and patience, have begun to rediscover them, one by one. Their outlines trace long-forgotten segments of the wall, stretching farther west than once believed, deep into desert terrain once thought impassable. What they've found is not just defense, but life. Inside these towers, remnants remain. Fragments of bamboo, slips used for writing, bits of armor, coins, charred grain, animal bones, a child's footprint frozen in ancient mud. Each item a quiet echo of presence, a whisper that someone once stood here, waited here, lived here. The soldiers assigned to these towers lived in silence and solitude, often young, often conscripted. They were sent to the empire's edge with no promise of return. Their job was not glorious. It was patient, enduring. They watched the horizon for movement, dust, trails, riders, signals from neighboring towers. Communication between towers was essential. Smoke by day, fire by night, flags, mirrors, drums, each signal part of a fragile chain stretching for hundreds of miles. A single sighting could spark a ripple across the wall, alerting garrisons days away. But most days there was nothing, just wind, the creak of wooden beams, the slow erosion of routine. Food was sent in caravans from central supply depots, dried meat, rice, wine sealed in ceramic jugs, but delays were common and stores often spoiled. Soldiers learned to forage when they could, trapping wild hares, gathering roots, conserving every scrap. Water was more precious than coin. Wells were few, cisterns sometimes unreliable. Inside the towers, space was tight. A few men huddled close in cold winters, pressed together for warmth. In summer, they cooked beneath makeshift awnings, shielding food from both sun and sand. Their beds were mats, their pillows, their bundled clothing. When it rained, if it rained, the roof often leaked. When it didn't, dust settled thick in the corners. And yet, even here, far from courts and cities, civilization followed them. Slips of writing, uncovered in the desert, describe small disputes, petty theft, insults, complaints about rations. One soldier filed a report against another for borrowing his firewood without permission. Another complained of a torn boot, requesting repairs. These records, written with deliberate brushstrokes, survived the centuries in the arid climate. They remind us these were not just sentries, they were people. Some towers doubled as post stations. Messengers on horseback would arrive, dust-caked and weary, handing off scrolls from the interior. Sometimes news from the capital, sometimes just routine updates. Occasionally, a letter from home. Few of these letters survive, but those that do are poignant. A father writing to a son, a brother urging another to return. A poem scribbled on a discarded scrap of bark, folded carefully, never delivered, even in the desert. Hope persisted, but so did isolation. There were times when entire outposts fell silent. No messages, no signs. And when investigators arrived weeks later, they found only collapsed beams, sand-filled footprints, and no living soul, whether lost to raiders, disease, or simply abandonment. No one could say for certain. Today, the desert keeps its secrets. Well, many towers remain buried shapeless beneath the shifting dunes. But through satellite surveys and gentle excavation, more are found each year. Each rediscovery rewrites what we thought we knew. The wall was not one line, but many. Not one purpose, but dozens. It was boundary, barricade, beacon, and home. A temporary, fragile home for those stationed on its edge. Those who stood watch over the vast unknown. As we leave the desert behind, let us turn our gaze not outward, but inward, not toward the lonely towers and crumbling earth, but through the gates of power, through the painted corridors and silk-draped chambers of the forbidden court, where whispers moved faster than arrows, and ritual bound every breath. Through the painted corridors and silk-draped chambers of the forbidden court, where whispers moved faster than arrows, and ritual bound every breath. Now, imagine yourself not in dust or wind, but in stillness, the stillness of lacquered floors, the quiet rustle of silk sleeves, the faint clink of jade pendants swaying from narrow belts. You are inside the imperial court of the Han dynasty, perhaps near the reign of Emperor Wu. Around the 2nd century BCE, the outer world may be harsh and uncertain, but in here, within the palace walls, every detail is controlled. This is not a space of toil and stone. This is a world of shadows and screens, of etiquette and endless ceremony. The forbidden court, so-called, not for its brutality, but for its inaccessibility, was hidden at the center of the imperial palace complex, shielded by walls and hierarchy. Very few ever passed its thresholds. Even fewer understood the silent mechanics that governed life within. The emperor, though singular in title, was a figure both omnipotent and isolated. His every action was observed, recorded, mimicked. When he rose, the court stirred. When he frowned, courtiers tensed. When he smiled, it was noted carefully in the day's register. But even he was bound by tradition, by advisors, by ghosts of emperors past. His court swirled with ministers, generals, eunuchs, concubines, scholars, astrologers, cooks, and attendants. 1,000 roles, 1,000 ambitions, each playing their part in an eternal performance, choreographed with near supernatural precision. Inside the inner palace, the air was often heavy with incense sandalwood, amber camphorlit, not only to please the senses, but to purify, to elevate, to signal. The walls were painted with scenes of mountains and cranes, immortals drifting through clouds, a reminder of both nature's beauty and heaven's presence. Every morning, the emperor received his officials in the hall of audience ministers, dressed in dark robes edged with crimson or indigo, would line up in solemn rows. They bowed low first once, then again, then a third time before approaching with scrolls clasped in both hands. Words were spoken slowly, movements were measured. To speak out of turn or with too much fervor could mean disgrace, or worse. Behind these scenes, within even more secluded quarters, the empress and concubines ruled a court of their own. The women of the palace, many brought in as teenagers, some never leaving, lived within a system just as intricate as the one outside. Rank dictated everything, from the number of servants they could command, to the embroidery on their robes, to how close they might come to the emperor's presence. Their lives were shaped not by the sword, but by silken war alliances, favors. Rumors passed like folded notes behind screens. Meals were a spectacle of refinement. Dozens of dishes might be prepared, though only a few bites would be eaten. Rice flavored with cassia, duck glazed with honey and wine, fish steamed in lotus leaves. Every dish was tasted first by eunuchs trained to detect poison, an ancient paranoia that never quite left the palace. Music drifted through the halls, soft and steady, played on guqin or bamboo flute. Dancers moved in slow, hypnotic steps, sleeves trailing like water, faces unreadable. Their performances were more than entertainment. They were gestures of order, reflections of cosmic harmony. Even rest was ritualized. The emperor's bedchamber, far from being a private space, was a site of careful scheduling. Which concubine would join him on which night was recorded by court officials. It was not romance, but policy. The birth of an heir carried consequences for generations. Yet, amid the controlled beauty of it all, the court could feel cold. So much depended on favor, on subtle glances, on a spoken word, or an unspoken one. Alliances could shift overnight. A whispered accusation, a sudden illness, a moment of poor timing, any could mark the end of a career or a life. But still, life persisted here in quiet cycles. A favorite poet might be summoned to recite beneath the lanterns. A child's laughter might echo briefly in the courtyards before being hushed by protocol. A young scribe, hunched in lamplight, might copy documents late into the night, dreaming, perhaps, of rising one day beyond the archive and through it. All seasons changed. In spring, the plum blossoms fell like silent snow across the courtyards. In summer, the palace drums echoed softly through the heavy heat. In autumn, chrysanthemums were offered in golden trays. And in winter, the silence thickened, broken only by the crunch of footsteps on frozen stone. Inside the forbidden court, time moved differently. Years passed, and yet so little changed. Each emperor died, another rose, some remembered, some not. But the rituals endured, the silence endured. Now, let us leave the palace behind. Let us step softly back from silk robes and burnt incense, from towers and tombs, from conquest and toil and return gently to where we began, to stillness, and return gently to where we began, to stillness. You have traveled far tonight, from the blistered fingertips of laborers building the great wall stone by stone, to the cold mind of an emperor who believed he could outlive time itself, to the desert's edge where forgotten towers stood watch under endless sky, and into the silent heart of the forbidden court, where power whispered behind silk screens. Each place, each life, was shaped by the same quiet truth, that behind every monument, behind every name etched in history, there were always countless others, unnamed, unseen. Their hands built the empire. Their breath warmed the cold mornings. Their footsteps wore paths into the earth. Their silence became the rhythm of a nation, and yet they are still with us, in the weathered stones that refuse to fall, in the brittle slips of bamboo unearthed from desert sand, in the fading brushstrokes of a forgotten decree still faintly visible after 2,000 years, in the bones of a wall that once divided and connected a world. As you rest now, perhaps with eyes already growing heavy, know that history is not only made by the great and powerful, it is made, too, by the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who labored without song. Tonight, you have walked among them, and now there is nothing more you need to do. Let your breath slow, let the distant echo of drums and footsteps fade, and let yourself drift gently into rest. Wherever you are, let this be a moment to let go. Allow your body to settle. Let your shoulders ease, your jaw unclench, and your thoughts soften into the rhythm of something slower, older. Tonight, we'll be taking a quiet, unhurried walk through some of history's most feared places, not castles or battlefields, but buildings filled with hope, desperation, and the ever-present shadow of illness, places that once pulsed with footsteps, with whispered prayers, with the heavy stillness of waiting, and the slow passage of time. Each place we visit tonight once held people not unlike you, people trying to stay alive, people caring for the sick, people watching, waiting, hoping. Their names have faded, their faces are long forgotten, but the air they breathed, the fears they carried, and the beds they lay in remain, if only in the ghosted corners of history. We begin in a place few would choose to enter, the plague hospital. Not a place of healing, but of separation, where silence fought against suffering, and where the day's routines moved forward, even as lives slipped away. Imagine waking up in the dim light of a 17th century morning. There's a strange stillness in the air. Outside your window, the world feels distant, too quiet. The birdsong is thinner. The carts on the street are fewer. A thin plume of smoke rises in the distance, sharp with the bitter smell of burning. Herbs and damp would people speak less loudly now. They cross to the other side of the street when they see a neighbor cough. Doors shut quickly. Windows stay latched. News has spread. The plague is back. You feel a heaviness in your limbs. Your head is warm, your throat dry, but you say nothing, not yet. You drink a little water. You sit by the fire, but by the next morning, there's no more denying it. The fever has taken hold. The swellings come soft, painful lumps beneath your arms, near your groin, behind your ears, and someone, quietly, knocks on the door. It's time. You are brought to the plague hospital. Its doors are thick, wooden, and reinforced with iron. designed not to keep people out, but to keep illness in. You're not greeted, you're taken. Inside, the world smells different. A pungent stew of old sweat, burned herbs, vinegar, and something sour, something you can't quite name. The air is warm, too warm, and thick with a heaviness that clings to your throat. The floors are either packed earth or rough stone, strewn with rushes. These rushes are meant to absorb spillages, waste, and worse, but they only mask it slightly, crunching underfoot, trapping the damp. There is no true silence here, only the low, ever-present murmur of breathing, of coughing, of moaning, and the muffled shuffle of hurried footsteps. Doctors move quietly between beds. You may not recognize them as doctors at all. They are dressed in long, dark robes, gloves, pulled up to the elbow, and most notably, the bird-like masklon and curved like a beak, stuffed with dried flowers, cloves, and mint. They believe the air itself carries the disease, and that these sweet-smelling barriers will keep it at bay. One gestures at you. You are shown to a cot. The bedding is thin, scratchy linen, a single blanket. Someone else lies nearby too still. Your treatment begins quickly, without much explanation. If your fever rages, they may cut your arm to bleed you, letting the corrupted blood escape. If you're sluggish or vomiting, they may force a purging tonic down your throat, often made from bitter herbs or iron salts. If your buboes swell too much, they are lanced, drained, and covered in warm poultices, butter and onions, crushed figs, bits of old remedies passed down more by habit than science. There is no comfort. The attendants are efficient, but rarely gentle. There is no time for kindness. Most do not speak unless necessary, and when they do, it's soft, clinical, distant. Your neighbor coughs through the night. Someone calls out for water. A child weeps, then falls silent. In the corner, a priest recites prayers, his voice low, steady, rhythmic, half blessing, half lullaby. The food, when it comes, is plain, a thin broth, hard crusts of bread, warm water infused with herbs if you're lucky. No one eats much. Hunger is dulled by heat, by sickness, by fear. At night, candles flicker. The air grows colder. Rats scratch at the corners. Some attendants sweep through with lime water, trying to clean what cannot be cleansed. The hospital has its own rhythm. Beds are filled. Beds are emptied, then filled again. Some patients are shackled, not out of cruelty, but for their own safety. Fever can bring madness. Screams echo sometimes, but rarely for long. Outside, the carts arrive at dawn. Those who passed in the night are wrapped, not in coffins, but in canvas, taken away before the sun grows too high. If you survive 3 days, you're lucky. 5, and they might start to look at you with cautious hope. 7, and you may be moved to another ward, one for those who might recover, but most don't. And still, even here, even in this place of fear and silence, life persists. An attendant wipes a brow. A nurse places a fresh cloth over a swollen face. A child clings to a wooden doll, too small to understand. A doctor, behind his mask, pauses for a moment, his hand resting briefly on a shoulder, before moving on. This is not a place of healing, but it is a place of care. In the quietest, most practical sense of the word, you are not alone here. Even if you do not speak, even if you are too sick to move, you are seen, watched over, cared for, remembered, if only for a day, and now, gently, we step away from the heavy air of the ward, back into the cool quiet of the evening, away from the sounds of suffering and toward a different kind of bravery. A woman, far from the hospitals, who picked up a pen and challenged the very idea of what it meant to face a disease. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu waits, in candlelight, with her letters and her secrets. Let's go to her now. And so we leave the plague hospital behind. Its walls grow smaller as we drift outward, until its silence is replaced by a quieter kind of courage. Not the stoic silence of the sickroom, but the stillness of a woman writing late into the evening, quill to paper, candle flickering, the rustle of skirts, the soft creak of a chair as she leans forward, choosing each word with care. Her name is Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. You may not have heard of her. Many haven't. But in the early 18th century, she became a most unlikely warrior against one of history's deadliest diseases, smallpox. She was not a doctor, not a scientist. She was a noblewoman, a mother, a wife to an ambassador, and most importantly, she was a survivor. As a child, smallpox had nearly ended her life. It left her physically changed, scarred, as it did so many others. It was a disease that didn't just kill, it marked. It took beauty, breath, and the ability to move freely in society. For someone of Mary's position, the scars were not only painful, they were a kind of social exile. Years later, while living in Constantinople, now Istanbul, Mary observed something strange. In the courtyards of homes, she saw women performing a ritual. They gathered in groups, laughing gently, preparing a paste made from the dried pus of someone recovering from smallpox. A tiny scratch would be made in a child's skin, and the mixture would be rubbed in. Then they would wait. The child might develop a mild fever, a few spots, but nearly all survived, and more importantly, they were then immune. It was called virilation, a practice common in parts of the Ottoman Empire, but virtually unknown and feared in the West. Mary watched, not once, but many times. She spoke with the women. She asked questions. She didn't dismiss it. She didn't scoff. She took notes. And then, when her own son reached the right age, she made a decision that shocked everyone around her. She had him VARIOLATED. This was not a quiet act. This was not something one did in secret. She wrote letters home to England. She described the process. She praised its results. She challenged the medical orthodoxy of her day, not with fury, but with facts, with experience, with the clarity of a mother who had seen another path and taken it. When she returned to England in 1721, smallpox still ravaged the population. There were no hospitals for it, no treatments. It killed indiscriminately, and she knew that if she could persuade others, if she could make them see what she had seen, lives could be saved. But she was not a man. She was not a physician. Her knowledge came not from textbooks, but from observation, from intuition, from courage. And that made her dangerous, to some even laughable. Still, she pressed on. She invited physicians to her home. She showed them her son, now thriving and immune. She offered to let them observe a new variolation on a young girl. Some were intrigued, others horrified, but word spread. Eventually, the Princess of Wales herself, concerned for her own children, took interest. A royal trial was arranged. Prisoners and orphans were variolated under supervision. The results were promising. The practice, once seen as foreign and suspect, slowly began to earn its place in English medicine. Mary watched from the sidelines. Her role was downplayed, her gender used against her. But her words, those carefully written letters, filled with observation, conviction, and maternal urgency, had already done their work. She did not win every heart, but she opened a door. Imagine her now, seated beside the fireplace in a quiet London home. Her dress rustles as she stands to stir the embers. The candle on her desk flickers. The city outside breathes with fog and soot, but inside there's warmth, the quiet strength of someone who acted not for fame, but for life. She continues to write. The words come slowly, with care, each letter a thread, weaving understanding into the minds of others. She knows the stakes. She remembers the fever, the scars, the helplessness, and she knows somewhere, someone is reading and changing. Though variolation would one day be replaced by vaccination, by Jenner, by science, by needles and antiseptic, it was Mary who first brought the whisper of that idea to the West, not with a lecture, but with a letter, not with power, but with persistence. Her name is now written quietly in the margins of medical history, but it is written all the same. And as her candle burns low and her ink runs dry, we step away once more into the cool night beyond her window, past the streets of London, past the palaces and drawing rooms, toward the dark waters of the Venetian lagoon, where another kind of isolation once took shape, on an island built not for healing, but for keeping the sickness far from the living. Veglia. Its stones remember more than they reveal, and it waits quietly. Now the soft light of the drawing room fades, the scratch of the quill, the warmth of the hearth, and the faint sounds of London disappear behind us like a memory in their place. Water dark, gentle, and stretching outward in every direction. We drift now across the still surface of the Venetian lagoon. The oars of a long-forgotten boat dip soundlessly into the water, guiding us forward through a quiet mist. Venice sleeps behind its domes and spires, slowly swallowed by fog. Ahead lies something smaller, simpler, and stranger. Veglia. A tiny island, no more than a dark smudge on the horizon. Trees overgrown, walls crumbling, windows hollow. No lights shine, no voices call, and yet it is full of memory. Poveglia did not begin as a place of sorrow. For centuries it was a peaceful spot home. 2 fishermen, a quiet monastery, a village built on slow rhythms and salt air. But in the 18th century, when the Black Death returned and returned again, the Republic of Venice made a decision. They needed a place to send the sick, not a hospital in the traditional sense, not a home for healing, a quarantine station, an isolation island. Here the plague could burn itself out far from the city's fragile beauty. The island became a lazaretto, a place where ships suspected of carrying plague were forced to dock. Passengers and crew were brought ashore and made to wait 40 days or more. 40 days. Quaranta giorni. The root of our word, quarantine. For some, it was just a long stay. For others, it was the last. Over time, Poveglia transformed. Temporary. Tents became barracks. Barracks became hospitals. The hospital became something else. Records are sparse. Many were lost. Others, perhaps, were never kept. But what we do know is this. Tens of thousands came here. Many did not leave, and yet, day after day, the island lived. Attendants swept the floors. Gardeners tended the trees. Bells rang out from the tower to mark the hours. There were kitchens, laundries, medical rooms, holding chambers, incinerators. At night, the sound of waves lapped against the stone. Lamps flickered along narrow paths. Some patients wrote letters. Others prayed. Many simply waited. Imagine standing on the dock as the boat pulls away, leaving you behind. The smell of salt in the air. The faint scent of smoke from a chimney somewhere on the island. The realization that this might be where your story ends. But there was order here in its own way. The Venetian authorities were meticulous. Cleanliness, isolation, routine, these were their tools, not from cruelty, but from fear. Fear of what would happen if the sickness spread again to the heart of Venice. And so Poveglia remained closed to the world. Even after the waves of plague subsided, it was not forgotten. Later, in the 19th century, it was repurposed yet again. A hospital, still, of sorts. A place for the ill, the mentally unwell, the unwanted. Its buildings changed with the time's new wings added. Old ones abandoned. Vines creeping up old stone. But the ghosts of its earlier days never quite left. Some say you can still hear the whispers, that voices echo from empty rooms, that shadows pass behind the boarded-up windows, that the bells still ring, though the tower has long since fallen silent. Whether or not you believe such things, Poveglia holds the weight of memory, not of horror, but of isolation, of people taken from their homes, not because they were wicked, but because they were feared, of nurses who carried hot broth to bedside after bedside, of doctors who worked in wool coats and gloves, with the sea air chilling their bones, of patients who watched the city skyline from a distance, wondering if they'd ever see it again. And underneath the soil, history rests. The island grew, they say, not only from stone and earth, but from ash, cremated remains, layers of the past pressed down by time and tide. Today, no one lives there. The buildings crumble in silence. Trees twist through broken roofs. Ivy clings to brick like a memory that won't quite loosen. Boats pass, but rarely stop. Still, archaeologists visit quietly, respectfully. They walk the overgrown paths. They examine the faded plaster of abandoned halls. They uncover pieces, a shard of pottery, a comb, a button. And for a moment, the island breathes again, not with fear, but with remembrance. Because beneath the stories, the legends, the whispered tales of haunting, Poveglia is something simpler, a place where people once were, people who coughed, who cried, who waited, who hoped, and then faded, just as the island itself now fades into the mist behind us. As we drift onward, the waves grow quieter still. The air thickens with warmth. The scent of jasmine replaces salt. And in the distance, candlelight glows from windows high above the city streets. We are entering another kind of world entirely. A home not of illness, but of imagined health, where healing came not from science or isolation, but from perfumed air, powdered wigs, and whispered superstition. The noble households of Paris. Let us go there now. Now we leave the mist behind us. The lagoon fades. The water grows shallow. The air warms, thick with the scent of blossoms, and something sweeter baked bread, perhaps, or fresh linen drying in the sun. And then the sounds return, not the coughing of the sick, not the silence of the forgotten, but laughter, the muted clink of porcelain, the swish of silk over polished floors. We have entered a different kind of space entirely, Paris, somewhere in the 18th century, and here, behind high stone walls and wrought iron gates, we find ourselves stepping into the world of the aristocracy, a world concerned with beauty, with grace, and curiously with health. But this is not the health of charts and blood pressure and microscopes. This is health imagined through texture and smell, through custom and belief. This is the noble household where wellness is a matter of lifestyle, lineage, and ritual, and where the truth of the body is often hidden beneath powder, perfume, and posture. Let us walk through the main hall. The air is soft, filled with the warm scent of beeswax and rosewater. Sunlight streams through tall windows, filtered through lace curtains. On the walls, portraits gaze down from their gilded frames. They are impossibly composed, polished, perfect. Your feet touch carpet, not thick, but enough to soften your step. A servant in livery passes, nodding without making eye contact. Every movement here is rehearsed. The rhythm of the house is one of precision. In a room just ahead, a woman sits at her vanity. Her hairdresser stands beside her, carefully arranging powdered curls into elaborate loops. The air is hazy with the scent of lavender, powder, and starch. On the table before her, small jars of creams and salves, brushes, perfumes, tiny tins of rouge and blue powder for veins, white lead for the face. She believes this makes her healthy, pale. Skin is a sign of refinement, touched by sun, unsullied by labor. Rouge mimics a healthy flush, a mark of vigor. The blue at her temples mimics the veins beneath porcelain skin, a fashionable illusion of transparency. She dabs a little scent at her neck. Orange blossom, perhaps, or musk. Fragrance is more than vanity, is believed to purify the air. Bad smells are dangerous. Illness, they think, floats on odors, on corrupted breezes. And so rooms are perfumed heavily, and skin is anointed. Often, next door, a physician is visiting. He is not the kind who toils in overcrowded hospitals. He is a gentleman of letters, of appearance. He bows upon entering. He carries a silver-tipped cane. He may not touch the patient at all. Instead, he observes. He inquires about sleep, appetite, mood, complexion. He checks the pulse delicately. With gloved fingers, he offers suggestions. More air, perhaps. A change of diet. A cooling herbal infusion. Illness here is not shouted. It is whispered. It is referred to in vague terms. A chill, a touch of melancholy, nerves. To be sick is inconvenient, improper. It disrupts the order of things. Still, precautions are taken. Servants burn herbs in pans in the corridors. Linen is changed often. Chamber pots are emptied with discretion. A house of this stature may even have a resident surgeon, living quietly in a separate wing on call for anything requiring more than elegance. Bloodletting is still common. Leech jars sit discreetly on the apothecary shelf, their contents hidden beneath a laced cloth. If someone is feeling thick or dull, a gentle purge may be recommended, not because it helps, necessarily, but because it fits within the order of balance. The body, like the household, must be kept orderly, clear, light, and yet, for all their effort, illness still comes. Behind the silk curtains, behind the perfume and powdered wigs, bodies remain vulnerable. Tuberculosis whispers through the corridors. Colds blossom into fevers. Infection creeps quietly beneath the skin, but the illusion holds. At the table, dinner is served in courses. There is music, always music. Laughter drifts down the hall. A fan flicks open. A glass is raised. Somewhere, a child plays beneath the gaze of a governess. To be alive here is to perform. Even health is performance. Yet it is not empty. There is tenderness. A mother presses a cool cloth to her child's forehead. A friend reaches out with quiet concern. A servant lingers a moment longer at the foot of the bed, smoothing the sheets, whispering comfort. Wellness in this house is as much about care as cure, about presence, about making the world seem calm, even when it is not. And now we drift upward, past the creaking stairs, past the scent of lavender oil and fresh bread, past the soft sounds of distant conversation, out through the tall windows into the starlit air above Paris. The city sleeps beneath us. The lights flicker. The wind moves gently through the streets. The river glides silently beneath the bridges, and history rests. Each place we have visited tonight once throbbed with urgency, with noise, with sorrow and effort and hope. But now they are quiet. Even the darkest buildings soften in the memory of time. Even the hardest moments become gentle when viewed from here, from the calm of distance, the hush of reflection, the peace of knowing it has passed. And so we float, gently now, above it all, above the flickering lamps of old Paris, the misted canals of Venice, the quiet corners of Istanbul, the cold stone wards of the plague hospital. We've walked through places shaped by fear, by care, by memory. We've stood in the shadow of sickness and seen not only pain, but humanity. Every bed we glimpsed, every hallway we passed through, once held the heartbeat of a life, a breath, a choice, a gesture. Some of those moments were marked by desperation, others by courage, and many by quiet, unnoticed acts of tenderness. A cool cloth on a fevered brow, a letter written in hope, a herb placed gently on a windowsill, a lullaby hummed beneath a surgeon's hands. And now, as the candle burns low, as your breath settles into a slower rhythm, we leave those places behind. The hospital doors are closed. The island is still. The drawing rooms are dark. The letters have all been written. And you are here, in the quiet comfort of now no masked doctor hovers at your bedside. No boats carry you away. There are no rats in the walls, no thick air of vinegar and ash, no waiting carts in the street. There is just this room, this breath, this warmth. The people of the past lived in a world of mystery and fragility, and yet they endured. They built lives around uncertainty. They created beauty amid fear. They offered what comfort they could with the tools they had. And in remembering them gently, we also remember how far we've come. So let their stories fade now, like mist at sunrise. Let the footsteps grow distant, the candles flicker out, the pages turn to silence. Let history rest, and let yourself rest with it. You are safe, you are still, and the past is sleeping now. Good night.